been a part of all society's history for a long time. Students need to understand not only the history of religions, but also the role that religion had played previously and still plays currently.
Now, it's been mentioned that obviously not only looking at Christianity, which is Australia was settled mainly by Christians, but obviously the need to then understand Islam, to understand Hinduism. How important would it be to balance out all the religious mantras, all the religious areas, so that children get a vast education in theology?
You mentioned a vast education in theology. I'm not sure that that's what we really need. I think we do need to make sure that students in Australia understand the role and history of Christianity, but we live in the Asian region, and students in Australia need to understand as well the role and history of the major religions of the countries within our area. Not saying that it necessarily has to be to the same depth, but they do need to understand Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Confucianism. Can I add as well, it's not just about religions. There's a lot of people in Australia, 25% of the population, who now positively identify as non-religious. Those people also have a moral philosophy. They have educational standards and ethical standards. I think that any teaching of religion ought to include teaching and curriculum about ethical standards that don't involve religion.
And what would those ethical standards be? How would you coordinate that curriculum?
How would I coordinate? Well,
what would you put together if you were being advised to help put together a curriculum in schools where, say, they're being taught 1 or 2 hours a week to try and cover everything? How could that be done?
It's been done in other countries, and there are people in Australia who know in a great deal of depth the way that curriculum has been pulled together in other countries. We don't have to start from a blank sheet of paper. We can take, for example, the curriculum that's been put together in Quebec, very positive curriculum that is age-related, and adapt that for the sort of region and history that Australia has.
Critics have argued that religion should be taught at home. Why do you think there is a resistance in some parts of our society to having religion taught in schools?
I think that the resistance is not so much about... We have to distinguish here about teaching about religion and instructing in a particular form of religion. What parents are, I think, properly cautious about is instruction in a particular type of religion. That's what happens in special religious instruction or special religious education. And I think parents are quite properly very cautious about that form of teaching or instruction in a particular doctrine. In the past, that has led to a lot of division and debate between various forms of Christianity, for example. But let's distinguish that from what's called general religious education. Most people are in favour of general religious education. We are, the Rationalists are, and most of the public, I would suggest, would be in favour of general religious education.
Interestingly, the Rationalist Society of Australia, you put together a 10-point plan for a secular Australia. People on the surface might argue that you being so forthcoming, I guess, and so supportive of not religious instruction but religious education in schools might contradict that 10-point plan. How does that work with the Rationalist Society of Australia fitting into that model?
Well, we've said in the 10-point plan that we're in favour of education about religions. What we're not in favour of is, frankly, the indoctrination of young children into a particular doctrine of religion, and that's what's happening in a number of government schools in Victoria, but elsewhere as well. That's what we're against.
Meredith Doig, you've spoken earlier about sort of the importance of children growing up in this region, this Asian region, having that sense of understanding about the world around us, especially geographically. How important is education in terms of tolerance? You know, Helen Keller, that famous quote, highest result of education is tolerance. Is this kind of education in schools, more of it, would that lead to a more tolerant generation of children and of adults?
Well, obviously that's the aspiration, and we believe that that would happen. If you take the opposite of that, in fact, instructing in a particular form of religion, we would say that this is what leads to divisiveness within society. Australia has a population now that is 30% first or second generation coming from overseas. It is a fact that we need to deal with. We have a very diverse society. We need to ensure that education, being one of the major forms of social lever, that it contributes to cohesion and understanding across the various forms, various groups in society, rather than contributing to a divisiveness between those groups.
Finally, Meredith Doig, do you think that religious education, there's been concern that it could be hijacked by special interest groups? Is there a concern around that, do you think?
Well, I think that's unfortunately what we're starting to see with the appointment of these two people, Kevin Donnelly and Ken Wiltshire, to the review of the ACARA national curriculum. It seems to us that this is the beginning of yet another culture war. We've already had the history wars. I think, unfortunately, we're going to have to look forward now to the education wars.